They call a meeting to order. Call our meeting to order. GT, would you offer a blessing, please?
Be happy to, Chairman. Thank you. Join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we just give thanks for this glorious day. We give thanks for the rest of the night, Lord, and we just ask that your blessings over each and every individual that is here, members and staff and visitors today, that you just attend to their needs. And Lord, we ask your blessings over the proceedings here, that as we proceed at all we do and always say, serve to bring glory unto your name. Amen.
All right, thank you. We've got two bills that we'll be talking about today. The first is H.R. 2394, which everyone should have the text of. Reauthorizing everything that the committee has jurisdiction over is something we set out to do early on, and so this is one of those particular pieces of legislation. I want to thank Chairman Thompson and Ranking Member Lujan Grisham of the Conservation Forestry Subcommittee and Mr. Boss for introducing 2394. This legislation would reauthorize the authority for discretionary funding of the National Forestry Foundation, which has been consistently funding through appropriations despite an expired authorization from 1997. The National Forest Foundation has leveraged federal dollars with private donations at a ratio of 4-to-1 to assist the Forest Service with projects to restore and enhance our national forests and grasslands. I ask my colleagues to join me in supporting H.R. 2394 so we can continue this federal-private partnership that provides so many benefits to the National Forest Service. And with that, I ask Mr. Peterson to have any remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this legislation. The National Forest Foundation Act gives private groups and stakeholders a chance to help in the stewardship and management of our national forests and grasslands, and we should make sure that it continues. This is a type of public-private collaboration we should all be able to get behind, and the program leverages more than $4 for every federal dollar and keeps our forests healthy and less prone to fire. The program has received continued support from the Appropriations Committee, and I urge the committee to support reauthorization. Yield back.
Chairman yields back with Mr. Thompson, recognized for a statement.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Ranking Member, for your support. I want to thank my Ranking Member, Mr. Lujan, and Mr. Boss for his support. The National Forest Foundation has a simple mission: to bring people together. And to bring people together to restore and enhance our national forests and grasslands. Now, through the foundation, we're able to leverage private and federal dollars to support our nation's great forests in a variety of ways. These include planting trees, preserving wildlife habitat, surveying streams, restoring and maintaining trails, and the list goes on and on and on. The foundation has also taken upon themselves to educate and engage the American public on the importance of our national forests, as well as the national resources that are found within them. And since its charter in 1993, the foundation has been essential in helping to meet the challenges that the national forest system faces. It is an integral component in keeping our national forests, such as the one in my congressional district, the Allegheny National Forest, and dozens of other national forests around the country, viable and thriving for years to come. Simply put, the National Forest Foundation works, and this is a common sense reauthorization. I urge my colleagues to vote yes. Thank you, Chairman. Yield back.
Chairman yields back. Are there any other members who care to speak on this particular bill? Seeing none, Mr. Peterson?
And I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will please pass out the amendment. While they're passing it out, I skipped over the council's brief explanation of our bill. If you want to do that in the amendment at the same time, that'd be fine. Council?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. H.R. 2394 is the National Forest Foundation Reauthorization Act of 2015. Section 1 is the short title. Section 2 reauthorizes the National Forest Foundation Act through fiscal year 2018. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Mr. Peterson, explanation for your amendment.
Chairman, this amendment simply makes several technical amendments to the underlying statute. Does not make any substantive changes, but clarifies existing statutory language by correcting an internal reference and eliminating an unnecessary comma. I urge its adoption and yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Any further questions or comments on the gentleman's amendment? Seeing none, though, I ask the questions on the amendment of the gentleman from Minnesota. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Being the chair, the ayes have it, and the ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Does any other member have an amendment for this particular bill? Seeing none, I move that the bill, Mr. Peterson for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the bill H.R. 2394 as amended be reported favorably to the House and the recommendation that it do pass.
Thank you, gentlemen. Does any member wish to discuss the motion? Seeing none, then, the question is on the motion offered by the gentleman from Minnesota to favorably report H.R. 2394 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Being the chair, the ayes have it. The bill 2394 as amended is ordered reported favorably to the House. Does any member wish to file a supplementary, minority, additional, or dissenting views on 2394? If so, please have them submitted to the Council's office, room 1407, by noon on May the 22nd, 2015. Without objection, the usual instructions are given to staff that consist of making such technical, clarifying, and conforming changes as are appropriate without changing the substance of the legislation. Let's now take up H.R. 2393. The Agriculture Marketing Act of 2046 to repeal country of origin labeling requirements with respect to beef, poultry, and pork, and other purposes. The bill we have under consideration, 2393, this bill is narrowly drafted to eliminate the requirement for country of origin labeling for meat products from cattle and hogs, for which the WTO ruled against the program. We also eliminate the requirement for chicken, which faced high costs and little, if any, quantifiable benefits, and have asked to have this mandate repealed. No other products are affected. At 10 a.m. this past Monday, the WTO announced the fourth and final decision in the dispute concerning U.S. country of origin labeling requirements. After careful consideration of the claims by our most important trading partners that our country of origin labeling program for meat is unavoidably discriminatory, the WTO has again found in favor of Canada and Mexico, rejecting the U.S. arguments. This follows on the latest in a series of economic analysis by USDA, demonstrating that this failed marketing program adds extraordinary costs with no, I repeat, no quantifiable benefits. While I've been a critic of COOL, I agreed upon assuming the chairmanship of this committee that I would wait until the WTO issued its final decision regarding the legality of COOL. That's now occurred. The United States has lost. Some say we ought to keep waiting until the retaliatory measures have commenced before we consider our next step. That's not something I'm willing to do. We know we face retaliatory sanctions of some amount. Some would estimate that those are the billions of dollars. Regardless of the amount, we should not sit back and let the American businesses be held hostage to the desires of a small minority who refuse to acknowledge that this battle is lost. The committee now has a responsibility to work quickly and to ensure our economy and broad spectrum of U.S. industries do not suffer the economic impacts of retaliation. This bill before us is targeted response to the WTO decision that removes uncertainty, provides stability, and brings us back into compliance. No other viable options have been proposed, and frankly, it's now too late in the process to begin discussions, which rightfully should have begun when we first lost in 2011. I appreciate the hard work of Representatives Rausser and Costa on the subcommittee and the work of so many other members on and off the committee in supporting and co-sponsoring, I think we're up to 67 co-sponsors now, of this critical legislation. I urge members to support the bill, and I now yield to Ranking Member Mr. Peterson for any comments he might have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. COOL is something that's been around for quite a while. I think it ended up in the Farm Bill in 2002. 2008 Farm Bill, we had language that was worked out as a compromise that I thought everybody could live with, but it wasn't the case. And, I just don't think that repealing it 2 days after the decision is going to get us to a resolution, which is, I think, all of us want. I'm disappointed with the ruling. And as I said, I think repealing it is premature. No one wants to see retaliation, but it's important to point out that there are still several steps that have to occur before that would take place. And given what we've seen in the past, it took 15 months for the arbitration panel to issue a ruling in the U.S.-Brazil cotton case. It's unlikely the panel will rule on COOL retaliation within their 60-day window. I think we should take a serious look at the mandatory labeling requirements that are in place in more than 60 other countries. Yesterday, I met with the EU Agriculture Commissioner. The EU has mandatory labeling, and they just adopted born, raised, and reared a month ago in the EU, which is what the issue is really with this legislation. It's the fact that we have born, raised, and slaughtered in the statute, and the segregation that was required by that is what is at issue. So we have other countries moving in the other direction, and that's part of my issue with all of this, is that I think we should take some time and figure out what's going on in these other countries. Is there some other way for us to deal with this so we can actually come to a resolution that will avoid what all of us want to avoid, and that is the retaliation. There's obviously distinctions between the EU and what we try to do, but I think it's worth looking at. And I think that we can probably find a workable North American solution if we work at it. So again, Mr. Chairman, I think this bill is premature. I don't think it's the best way to avoid retaliation, and quite frankly, I don't think the Senate will be able to pass a repeal. And they're the ones that brought this into the situation in the first place in 2008. So I think we need to look at the big picture and work together to come up with a solution that will get us where we want to get and resolve this issue. I yield back.
Thank you, the gentleman. I recognize Mr. Rouser for his opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for your great leadership on this issue and working to move forward as quickly as we are. Bottom line is country of origin labeling is not trade compliant. That's well known at this point. And certainly in the state of North Carolina, we could suffer some very dire consequences given the retaliatory measures that we face to the tune of something almost to the tune of $500 million of exports. And so I commend the bill to my colleagues on the committee, and I hope that we will act quickly. And I encourage our colleagues on the other side of the Capitol to do so as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Recognize Ranking Member of the Livestock Committee, Mr. Costa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For a number of years, many of us have been concerned about how the mandatory government country of origin labeling has been implemented, and many of us feel it has simply not worked, notwithstanding the good intentions. I'm pleased that we have this hearing today. Chairman Conway, I want to thank you, and Chairman Rouser for your efforts collectively to look at how we change this country of origin labeling for beef, pork, and chicken products, because clearly the WTO has spoken after not once, not twice, not three, but 4 times we have failed to convince the World Trade Organization that this is an appropriate means for labeling these food products. Let's be clear, right now, this today is no longer about labeling. This is to ensure that we aren't dealt a devastating impacts to our agriculture economy through economic tariff retaliations. It's happened before. With yesterday's ruling by the World Trade Organization, we now face, within months, harsh retaliations from 2 of our largest trading partners, Canada and Mexico. The Canadian government has already published a list of commodities that will be subject to retaliatory measures, and its estimates that the impact could be well over $1 billion. In California, where I come from, it's hundreds of millions of dollars to the California wine industry, grape industry, host of fresh fruits and vegetables, as well as the impacts to beef, pork, and chicken. Canada, and all of our states are similarly impacted, imports 90% of their table wine, in this case from California, and the tariff is estimated to be raised at 100%. We grow really good wine in California, but I can tell if there's a choice with a 100% increased tariff between our wines and those in South America and in Europe, we're going to lose. So if consumers in Canada see the prices double, obviously they're going to stop buying a lot of products that are produced here in America. I think this is especially important that we act. Only a few years ago, under the category of lessons learned, we had a issue with Mexico on a trucking dispute, and it resulted in increased retaliatory tariffs that impacted and had long-lasting effects of billions of dollars to the agriculture economy of this country. So let us learn those lessons. And no one wants to see, I think anywhere in this committee, no matter how you feel about the country of origin labeling, these retaliatory effects taking place. But a recent United States Department of Agriculture study showed that consumers did not factor in their meat purchasing decisions by the labeling. It was price and it was the quality of the product they saw at the grocery store that ultimately made their determination. So in conclusion, I think we have the data, we have the studies, and we have the World Trade experience, the WTO, to show that it's time that we fix the problem that we've had for a number of years with cool. Now, many in Congress, including myself, want to see this problem resolved. We know it has to be done on a bipartisan basis. Some of our colleagues here, and Congressman Peterson spoke quite well of his concerns, have views on other ways this can be resolved. But at the end of the day, we must resolve this issue before these retaliatory tariffs take place. And for that reason, I support this legislation. And Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your leadership again. And when it's appropriate, I have an amendment to offer.
Thank the gentleman. Are other members wish to be heard on this? Mr. King for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say that if we go back to this in history ways, just as far back as 2008, and this cool issue goes back further than 2008, I supported the compromise language, and I supported it because I believe that there was an understanding that the packers and the retailers could accommodate this in a fashion that didn't upset the trade between especially Canada and the United States. I'm sensitive to that. About that time, what we saw happen was when the U.S. dollar was strong and the Canadian dollar was weak, a lot of U.S. capital was invested in Canada to move farrowing of hogs up into Canada for financial reasons and for also disease-free reasons. We had a lot of U.S. capital invested in Canada, and those pigs were coming down as iso-wean pigs and early in their lives and finished out, and of the 6 million that I recall, 4 million were coming into Iowa. I thought we had an accommodation in 2008. I was satisfied with the language, but not with the rules. And so we had the first decision by WTO, and when that happened, there was an opportunity to go back and rewrite the rules, and I was even less satisfied with the second set of rules. So we're at this point now where the WTO has concluded that the United States is guilty of trade protectionism. And these are our best trading partners that we have, and Mr. Costa mentioned them, Canada and Mexico. And so I'm glad we're here today to rectify this situation. The consumers have shown no inclination to prefer any particular kind of labeling, but I can tell you that we had some packers that decided they weren't going to slaughter pigs at all that were born in Canada. We had others that decided we'll do this only on Mondays. That upsets the entire stream, and if it's got the USDA stamp of approval on it, it's good enough for almost every consumer in the United States of America. I'd also add that there's no practical way, if you are a supporter of cool, then there's no practical way to restore cool because we're looking at the trade sanctions that are coming our way and the retaliation that have been mentioned here, $1 billion or more, and there's not a way for us to loop this thing back and pick it up. So wherever you were, if you believe that cool was a good idea, and you'd like to find a way to save it or restore it, we're still faced with this WTO decision and trade sanctions that are out there, and it's a very uncertain world to try to thread our way through to try to restore cool in any way at all. So I believe that our U.S. producers can compete with anyone, and we ought to treat our best trading partners as good as we can. This bill takes a good step in the right direction to do that, and I certainly support it and encourage its adoption, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Scott, Georgia.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You know, I really think that today we really need to stand up strong for our agricultural interests. In Georgia, we are the leader in chickens and poultry, the leader in the world. Our beef and our pork industries are very, very large and significant. We're talking about an impact here of billions and billions of dollars, particularly when you consider the retaliatory measures. Now, as many of you know, the WTO ruled for the fourth and final time regarding the ongoing dispute between Canada, Mexico, and the United States regarding mandatory country of origin labeling. This committee, we've been working on this for over 8 years. When I was chairman of the Livestock Poultry Committee, over and over again. I was pleased when the WTO ruled against mandatory country of origin labeling, primarily because of the retaliation that would have quickly ensued on behalf of Canada and Mexico. This is what this is about. It's almost like a civil war here. Canada, Mexico, and we in the United States caught in the middle. Some have categorized the retaliation efforts of COOL as simply grandstanding. Others have claimed that the retaliation effects would be minimal, if felt at all, and I couldn't disagree more. I'm here to tell you, folks, retaliation is real. We're talking billions of dollars. The tariff threat on U.S. exports, ranging from meat to fruit to biofuels even, is real. So the question is, why would we want to put our agricultural foundation at such a disadvantage? We shouldn't. Our very own United States Department of Agriculture Market Service, which, as you know, enforces COOL, has repeatedly stated that COOL is not a food safety program. It is simply a marketing program. So, Mr. Chairman, like you accurately stated earlier this week, the mandatory country of origin labeling is all cost and absolutely no benefit to us. Let us stand strong here, and let us send a strong message supporting our poultry and our beef and our pork industry. And it's for these reasons that I'm pleased to serve as a co-sponsor of this bill. And I hope that we will be able to get our House in order and pass a full repeal of COOL as soon as possible. Our poultry, our beef, and our pork industry deserves that kind of respect. So I urge passage of the bill, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Neugebauer, 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to associate myself with most of the remarks that have been made today. And I think that I've not been a proponent of COOL. I think that's no secret. But I think one of the things that I would say is to those people that, you know, are for labeling, this doesn't do away with labeling if you want to do it on a voluntary basis. There's been several marketing programs. The Certified Angus is one that I recall where people decided that they could develop a marketing edge by, you know, promoting the fact that this was certified Black Angus beef. But what we are doing is saying that the mandatory program isn't working, and that we've lost the WTO ruling on several occasions now. Even the USDA says this is not working. And I think we send a false signal to the American people that somehow there's an extra step in safety here when we have the mandatory labeling. So I am a co-sponsor of this bill, and I support it, and encourage my colleagues to do the same. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman's yield back. Council, will you recognize you for a brief explanation of the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. H.R. 2393 amends the Agricultural Marketing Act of 1946 to repeal country of origin labeling requirements with respect to beef, pork, and chicken. Subsection A amends the definitions. Subsection B repeals notice requirements for beef, pork, and chicken. Subsection C is a conforming amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Costa, I believe you have an amendment.
Yes, I would like to offer an amendment to H.R. 2393, Mr. Chairman.
Clerk will pass out the amendment, please. Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to discuss his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It won't take that long. This is a simple amendment, and I guess the best way to explain it to members of the committee here is that it's in the same gist of a manager's amendment that will allow any technical changes or corrections to be made as this legislation moves, hopefully today, out of the committee and to the floor, as we try to ensure that we work together on a bipartisan basis and that we're able to work with the Senate and work with the administration, which we know is absolutely essential if we are going to be successful in resolving this problem. And I ask adoption of the amendment.
Thank the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. I intend to support the gentleman's amendment. Other comments or questions on the gentleman's amendment? Seeing none, the questions on the amendment of the gentleman from California. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Any other member have a wish to present an amendment for the, to the bill? Seeing none, then I'd recognize Mr. Costa for the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the legislation H.R. 2393, and I thank you for this hearing today and look forward to continuing to work with you and members of the committee as we try to resolve this very important potential effective retaliatory tariffs that could affect America's agriculture economy.
Gentleman's amendment is to favorably report to the House with a recommendation that pass H.R. 2393. This motion is debatable. Other comments or questions? All right, seeing none, then the questions on the motion offered by the gentleman from California to favorably report H.R. 2393 as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. King.
I'd ask for recorded vote.
Recorded votes requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Nagelbauer. Mr. Nagelbauer, aye. Mr. Goodlatte. Mr. Goodlatte, aye. Mr. Lucas. Mr. Lucas, aye. Mr. King. Mr. King, aye. Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, aye. Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, aye. Mr. Gibbs. Mr. Gibbs, aye. Mr. Austin Scott. Mr. Austin Scott, aye. Mr. Crawford. Mr. Crawford, aye. Mr. Desjardins. Mr. Gibson. Mr. Gibson, yes. Mrs. Hartzler. Mrs. Hartzler, aye. Mr. Benishek. Mr. Benishek, aye. Mr. Denham. Mr. LaMalfa. Mr. LaMalfa, yes. Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis, yes. Mr. Yoho. Mr. Yoho, aye. Mrs. Walorski. Mrs. Walorski, yes. Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen, aye. Mr. Bost. Mr. Bost, aye. Mr. Rouser.
Aye.
Mr. Rouser, aye. Mr. Abraham. Mr. Abraham, aye. Mr. Molinar. Mr. Molinar, aye. Mr. Newhouse. Mr. Newhouse, aye. Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson, no. Mr. David Scott. Mr. David Scott, aye. Mr. Costa.
Aye.
Mr. Costa, aye. Mr. Walls.
No.
Mr. Walls, no. Miss Fudge. Ms. Fudge, aye. Mr. McGovern. No. Mr. McGovern, no. Ms. Del Bene. Ms. Del Bene, aye. Mr. Vela. Mr. Vela, aye. Ms. Lujan Grisham. No. Ms. Lujan Grisham, no. Ms. Custer. No. Ms. Custer, no. Mr. Nolan. No. Mr. Nolan, no. Mrs. Bustos. Aye. Mrs. Bustos, aye. Mr. Maloney. Aye. Mr. Maloney, aye. Mrs. Kirkpatrick. Aye. Mrs. Kirkpatrick, aye. Mr. Aguilar. Aye. Mr. Aguilar, aye. Ms. Plaskett. Aye. Ms. Plaskett, aye. Ms. Adams. Aye. Ms. Adams, aye. Ms. Graham. Aye. Ms. Graham, aye. Mr. Ashford. Yes. Mr. Ashford, yes. Mr. Chairman. Aye. Mr. Chairman, aye. Mr. Chairman.
How's Mr. Desjardins recorded?
Mr. Desjardins, you're not recorded. Aye. Mr. Desjardins, aye.
Any other members wish to record? All right.
37. Mr. Chairman,
Okay, one more vote. Mr. Denham?
Mr. Denham, aye. Mr. Chairman, the vote is 38 ayes to 6 nays.
All right, thank you. The motion is approved, and the bill is favorably reported to the House with the motion that do pass. Does any member wish to file a supplemental, minority, or additional or dissenting views to H.R. 2393? If so, please have them submitted to the council's office, room 1407, by noon on May 22nd, 2015. Without objection, the usual instructions are given to staff that consist of making such technical, clarifying, and conforming changes as are appropriate without changing the substance of the legislation. Seeing no other business, the committee is adjourned. Thank you very much.